And we're off and running on the Krueger Show. Hope everybody's having a phenomenal day. It is the 19th of June, 2024. Marty Lurie's in the house. And we're, of course, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville and they're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use that promo code KRUEG, KRUEG, and they'll match you up to your first $100. And we don't want to forget Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. We're brand new sponsors with them, or they're brand new sponsors with us, I should say. 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California. Call Anthony Catania at 831-521-5264. And we just signed a brand new sponsorship agreement today with Mancini's Sleep World. So there'll be a promo code, and you can go buy a mattress and get a phenomenal discount if you are a Krug Show fan and listener and subscriber and watcher. And thanks to Mancini's for sponsoring the Krug Show. And Marty Lurie's in the house. Marty sent me a note the other day. Hey, you still talking baseball? And I've done a lot of football this year because the Giants, kind of up and down. I've done some Giants, but not as much as I wanted to. But then, of course, in the last 24 hours, the announcement of the passing, the tragic, I don't know if it's tragic because he had a great life, 93 years of age. But the Say Hey kid is no longer with us. Willie Mays, the greatest Giant of all, the one my dad's biggest hero was Willie Mays, and loved him and talked a lot about him. We talked a lot about Willie throughout my childhood, and Marty, we're losing a lot of this generation, and I thank you so much for joining me on the Krug Show. My dad was born in 1937 and died during the pandemic. And Willie, I saw, was born in 1931. What an incredible life, 93 years of age. But it really kind of hit me hard. I don't know why. I mean, obviously, Willie, I didn't see Willie play live. I mean, obviously, I know all about his career. But I didn't see him play live because I was born in 70 and didn't really start really understanding what I was watching probably until, 76, 77, when Willie McCovey came back from playing with the A's and Padres. That 77 year was probably my first real recollection, though I did spend a summer in Chicago, and the summer of, I guess that was 78, he came back. 77, I spent that summer in Chicago watching a lot of the White Sox and the Cubs with my relatives. Both teams were in contention that summer. So that was kind of where I fell in love with baseball, Midwestern summer as a 7-year-old. And, but yeah, my dad loved Willie Mays and just talked about him an awful lot. And we're losing that generation. And it just hit me as I was looking at the fact he was born in 1931 as, this is a whole generation of people that were my father's contemporaries and his heroes and his people, and that we're losing them as time goes on, one after another. And it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet.
Well, it's the evolution of life. And first of all, it's great to be on with you. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad for your success. I know how hard you work at what you're doing. But Willie he was the face of the franchise. He was Giants baseball. He was San Francisco baseball. Of course, we had the championships of 10, 12, and 14, and Posey and Lincecum and guys like that. But Willie Mays was the father of Giants baseball. And that's what he represented to all of us. So even if you didn't see him play, you knew through anecdotes or film or talking to family members that he was the best. And he was the greatest player of all time. He could do things that no one else could do completely. Oh, others could hit a little better, maybe a little more power, but nobody could put it together like he could put it together. And losing him is a blow. It's losing a member of the family. It's someone that's been part of our lives, our entire baseball life, and someone we've always looked up to. And he had an amazing life off the field, getting on the field, the way he grew up, the way he got into baseball. It's the romantic side of baseball. When you say Willie Mays, you think of the hat flying off, the Say Hey kid, that swing, scoring from first base on a ground ball to shortstop or to left field. That's what Willie Mays represented, and we lost him. And it's the evolution of life. But boy, there's a lot of good memories of Willie.
They really are, and he came from a unique generation. And I was watching the retrospective. One of the things I do have on my DVR that I taped probably a year ago and left it there was the NBC Sports Bay Area Legends hour-long retrospective on Willie's career that they play often, really, on the channel. Anytime there's any kind of time inconsistency or a rain delay, anything at all where they've got an open loop, they'll throw the Legends series, and it talks, one of them's about the 2012 Giants, one's on the 2014 Giants. The one that I love is the one on Willie Mays, and I've taped it and I've watched it many times. And there's a part in there that I think is very interesting but also very sad, and that is that he said that his dad, he was talking about his dad, and that he got drafted out of high school. And he said, my dad must have piled up long distance phone bills for days, calling me all those nights in my early minor league days, giving me, listening to me and talking to me and counseling me. And I told him about all the racial hate that I ran into in Hagerstown, Maryland, and other places along the road. And that his father, begged him, don't fight back. Don't fight back. And this was kind of the Joe Louis era, as far as it was a coping mechanism to deal with the racial hate of the day that Willie experienced, that his father experienced. And to me, to hear that just brings me a lot of sadness, just a lot of sadness that Willie didn't just have to be great, that he had to overcome. He had to overcome odds, and he had to fight against people that didn't want to see him, even though he was a joy to watch. And every time I watch that retrospective and I hear him say, "Yeah, my dad would tell me, don't fight back, don't fight back." It's interesting that was their way of coping with the hate that they faced, but it's also sad, very, very sad. And it is interesting, Marty, because you were from New York and you saw, you were there when Jackie Robinson kicked open the doors, and Willie Mays and the Frank Robinsons and the Veda Pinsons, they all came in after that in the early 50s. And I don't know, it shows how far we've come as a society, but it also, to me, it's just sad that they had to endure that ignorance for so long.
Well, we have, whenever you look at history, you have to look at the times, and that's what was going on at that time. And there were different ways of coping with it. And being here in Birmingham, I'm getting ready for the game tomorrow night at Rickwood, which will turn into really a memorial of Willie Mays. It was going to be a tribute to Willie Mays and the Negro Leagues, and now it's almost cathartic to the whole country for everyone to do the things that we're going to talk about today, and that is the career of Willie Mays, and sort of dramatize it for the whole country starting tomorrow night. But Willie grew up in a time where I am in Birmingham, Alabama, and he played in the Industrial League. He played for Fairfield Industrial High School, which was a segregated high school. The white kids went to Fairfield High School. His dad, Cat Mays, was a nice ball player, and Willie was exceptional. And here it is in the 10th grade. And remember, we're in Alabama. This is not, New York, and, this is not California. This is not Jackie at UCLA or Jackie Lieutenant in the Army refusing to go and sit in the back of the bus. This is Alabama. And Willie's a high school kid, Larry. He's in 10th grade. And Cat Mays would drive him to Chattanooga, and he would play center field for the Chattanooga Choo-Choos of the Negro Southern League. And I went to that museum yesterday to see the tributes. Satchel Paige played there and others. It was the feeder system. So he would take him up there, and Willie would play. And then the Barons saw him. The Black Barons saw him. And Piper Davis was the one who said, boy, this kid can play. Cat, we want him to be with the Black Barons. Now, again, this is Alabama. It's a segregated society, and the Black Barons are part of the Negro American League at that point. So Cat says, okay, but he's got to go to high school. And this is, again, the man, they're molding the man, Willie Mays. He had to go to high school, but he was playing ball with guys who sharpened their spikes with razor blades. And they played the toughest ball you can imagine. That's why the stats that are now incorporated in baseball, it's fine to do that. These guys were great players. They may not have the number of at bats or hits that the others had, but to put their numbers in perspective, you realize how good they were. So Willie goes off to the Black Barons and he goes on the road trips, but he's still in high school. He's out of high school. Think of your kids who one just graduated college. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
But think of your kids. You know, he's off going to high school. So the teachers say, you've got to write a report on the cities you go to. And he does that. So he comes back and now it's time for graduation. 1950. He's only 18 years old. It's 1950. He was born in 1931. And actually, I guess he had just turned 19 at that point. So it's his graduation night and he goes to get his diploma. He was not going to miss that. He was a nice kid. He loved his mother. He loved his father. He loved his aunts. He was a good kid. And that feeds into the things you're talking about. That's the kind of guy Willie was. So he goes to get his diploma. And the next night he comes back to the Black Barons and hits a 3-run homer in 1950. Well, now the scouts are all over him. Some said, he can't hit the curveball. Some said, he should be a pitcher. But Eddie Montague knew it. And Eddie Montague said, no, this kid is going to be a star, and convinced Horace Stoneham to pay the Black Barons $15,000, of which Willie got a part that he gave to his family. And that's the way he became a New York Giant. So the point is, when he went to Hagerstown, he was seeing discrimination, but he grew up in discrimination. But the teammates understood it. Willie was a sensitive kid. He always liked young people. And when he would go into the room in Hagerstown, he would stay in a black motel, so to speak, and the other players would stay in a white motel. Well, the other players felt for Willie. They climbed in his window during the night to spend the night with him in his room. Then when the sun came up, they climbed out and went back to their motel. That's how much they loved Willie and how the kind of man he was and the kind of people that he attracted. So now he hits 350 and he comes back the next summer, next spring. It's 1951. And Leo says, I love this kid. We want him on the Giants. And Horace Stoneham says, nah, not yet. They sent him to Minneapolis. He hits 477. And they bring him up May of 1951. And he had just turned 20 at that point. So he's hitting 477. And Leo calls him. He's in a movie theater in Sioux City, Iowa, watching a movie that had an exhibition game. Minneapolis did. And Leo says, we need you. And Willie says, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. He said, what are you talking about? What are you hitting? And Willie says, 477. He says, you're ready. So they bring him up to New York. And here's the kid. This is the point, from Alabama. The kid who got his high school diploma. The kid who was upset because he couldn't go to his senior prom. The high school kid who got knocked down in the Negro League games. And Piper Davis. And how did Piper Davis get his name? Everywhere in this area here is steel and ore, coal. That's what Birmingham is all about. Piper Davis grew up in a little mining camp called Piper. And that's how they said, your name is now Piper Davis. So Piper Davis says, Willie, you get knocked down, you get up, you steal second, you steal third, and you show him what kind of ball player you are. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be that kind of ball player, always to show you how good he was. So he comes up and he goes 0 for 12 and he can't get a hit. And then he faces Warren Spahn at the Polo Grounds and he hits one over the roof in the Polo Grounds. And he goes 0 for 12 again. He's 1 for 25. And he's sitting in it. You know the story. He's sitting in his locker. He's crying. And Leo comes up and says, what's up? And he says, I can't hit, Leo. Mr. Leo. He still called him Mr. Leo. I can't hit. I can't hit. He says, son, you are my center fielder. I don't care what you hit. You're never going back. And of course, the career takes off after that. But to your point, that's the man he was when he got to the big leagues. He was not a rookie saying, hey, Ma, they're throwing the curveball. What do I do now? Oh, my God. He was a man. He was just a young man, but in experience, he was a man ready to go. So where does he go? New York City, of all places. He didn't go to Kansas City. He didn't go to Pittsburgh. He didn't go to Detroit. He went to the Big Apple. And now he's in New York. So what does he gravitate to? Kids. He loves kids. And he feels comfortable with kids. So he ends the game. New York Giants end the afternoon game. And where does he go? Back to the streets of Harlem to play stickball with the kids and buy them ice cream. And that's the Willie Mays that I love, the way he grew up. And I used to tease him. Look, I grew up in Brooklyn. I'd say, and look, Willie trusted me, and that's the highest honor I've ever had in my life. And we could get to how that happened, but I'd say, Willie, I can beat you in stickball. And of course, he would laugh and all that stuff. We would carry on like that together. But that's the man he was. He was just a kid, just a young man, but he had the experience of a veteran. And that's why he was so good. So that's the Willie that I always know. What's underneath that great say hey, hat falling off, and that great swing that we see in the statue. That's the Willie I know.
It's such an interesting life he led. I mean, I can remember going to the Old Timers game in the mid 70s or late 70s, and Willie was the last guy coming out in the convertible as they circled the field, and he was the star of stars then. And I was 9 years old. Here I am. I'm 54 years old now. We've had him for a long time. You probably don't remember, but I do remember. In 2000, the Giants played the Yankees in a game. I think it was Thursday night before they had opened against the Dodgers at Pac Bell Park, right? The beginning of the park. And yeah. I remember I was with you and we were in the dugout and you had a relationship with Willie. Willie was brought out. They sat him in the dugout and we all had our DAT machines and our recorders. And I remember you and me started doing the interview. And of course, others jumped in around us because it was kind of a scrum type situation. But I remember you introducing me to Willie, and we both were recording what he was saying, and it was to me it was a special moment because this was my father's hero and a guy who was to me the word that I would use to describe Willie is dignity. I mean, dignified. He was a truly dignified individual, and I just loved him for the career that he had and the way he played the game. I also think it's interesting, and I don't know who brought this up, but I think it's definitely true, is that Willie's physical gifts are what people talk about because the physical gifts are the obvious ones. He turned his back on home plate in the 54 series, dead sprint, Vic Wirtz, makes one of the most famous catches in the history of the game in the World Series. Giants sweep the Indians in 54, an Indian team that had Al Rosen that won tons of games, well over 100 games that year. So we see the throwing arm. We saw the speed. We saw the power. So people talk about that. But I think in some ways, Marty, I feel like Willie's physical gifts were so impressive that it really camouflaged his other unbelievable tool, which was what he had between the ears. He was the ultimate in thinking man's player. And yet, because of the unbelievable tools that are so readily apparent to the naked eye, and the intellect of the man is more nuanced, and it takes more study and more time watching him. I don't know. I kind of feel like his physical gifts took away from the fact that this might have been one of the smartest baseball players that of any era at any time. And we saw pictures of him, taking Orlando Cepeda with his glove, motioning him, move a little left, move a little right. You follow me. I'm going to play right center. You're going to move from, your spot over. I mean, he all those little index cards, Marty, these guys have in their back pocket that tell them where to play every hitter. He had that between the ears. And Herman Franks was like, I gave him the freedom to play center field the way he chose because he knew ball players. So I don't know. To me, Willie was the ultimate genius baseball player, in addition to being a cutting edge athlete. And I think his athleticism outshined his baseball brilliance. What do you think? Because you saw way more of him than I did.
Well, absolutely. He would tell me, look, he ran the team. he would tell Alvin Dark to tell the pitcher what to throw. He would give a signal to Alvin Dark, the shortstop, to say, look, have Magley throw this. That's how smart he was. That's how he ran the team. But look, he was the peacemaker. When Marichal hit Roseborough over the head in the 60s, in that incident at Candlestick, Willie was the one who took Roseborough into the dugout and put his arm around him and took care of him. At that point, he was the peacemaker. When Cepeda would go after Ruben Gomez or whoever was starting him with Cepeda, Willie would tackle him and bring him back to the dugout and stuff like that. Willie was the guy who really was the guy who ran the team. And I think he was such a smart ball player, the best base runner I've ever seen in my life.
He'd hit a double and stay on first, so they would pitch to McCovey.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how smart he was. But when he ran the bases, he would run them backwards. He'd be looking over his shoulder. He'd be running backwards at full speed to know exactly where the outfielder was, where the throw was going to come in. And that's the way he played. I interviewed Harry Kalas, the great broadcaster for the Phillies.
Loved Harry. What a gentleman.
Hello, it's Harry Kalas.
Harry Cal. That's right. Mickey Morandini. I loved Harry Kalas.
Very good. That's a good one. All right. So I interviewed him. I said, what's your biggest thrill in baseball? And he said, watching Willie Mays run the bases. And he described something to me, I may have said it earlier, that he scored from first base on a ground ball to left field, a single to left field. He scored from first base. And Harry Kalas, this veteran of Whitey, Richie Ashburn, and, the whole thing, the whole
Sure.
shit they had together, to him, that was the best moment that he had ever seen. And that's what Willie represented. Smart ball player, but he was the captain of the team. If he made an error, Gaylord would tell me, if he made an error, he gave his glove away. He didn't want it anymore.
Wow.
Gaylord said, I loved it because the outfielder's glove has got big fingers. And Gaylord said, that's where I'd put that stuff. I'd shove it up in those fingers. That's where I'd hide it. And I loved it when Willie would give me a glove. And that's, that was Willie. Eddie Montague, our dear friend who should be in the Hall of Fame, National League umpire.
His dad scouted Willie and signed Willie.
But Eddie would go to the ballpark with his dad, and Willie would give him a glove. And it was that kind of stuff. Willie loved kids. Willie loved to give stuff away. Willie was generous. Willie was one of the most unusual, unique people I've ever met in my life. And he, as I say to people, and he also happened to be the greatest player who ever lived.
Yeah. And your connection to him is unique. And Marty, you mentioned before that he trusted you, and there was no doubt you guys did a number of things, Tommy Bahama and other things that you guys did together, and he did trust you, and he wasn't trusting. I mean, he was distrusting, I think, if anything. If you were going to say one way or another, I think he was very circumspect about the people that came into his life and what their angle was and what they were looking for. But he trusted you. And I'm wondering, Marty, you mentioned, and I know it's, you say the three most important men in Willie's life, you could argue his dad, Kitty Cat, who, I guess swept up around the steel mills and this and that. Then it was Piper Davis, his first manager, and then it was Leo DeRocher. Did he ever confide in you or talk to you about who he learned the game from? I know the talk is that his father made him learn every single position, from catcher to pitcher to first to second, and all the different nuances, that his dad was the first person that taught him the game. But it really sounds like Piper was an incredibly unique, special man in Willie's life, in that they understood Willie was a teenager. He was a young man in an adult world, even at that time. And they were very patient with him. And Willie said Piper wouldn't yell at him. He would just point out what he did wrong and explain the game to him. And then, of course, DeRocher was very much his protector. DeRocher was was ferocious as far as a personality, and yet he was very much a defender of Willie in Willie's early days. So did you guys ever talk about who had the most impact on his life or on his baseball career, or how those three men impacted him?
Well, I think Piper, for me, was the one, because he would always tell the story about getting knocked down. and he would cry. They're throwing at me. They're knocking me down. He's a high school kid. Come on, he's Kevin's age. He's in high school. So Piper would say, of course, get up, steal second, steal third, and show him what a great ball player you are. And that's what he would do. So I think Piper taught him the rules of being a man in baseball. I think that was the one. So I'd say Piper really had the biggest influence on him. And of course, his dad gave him the discipline of showing up and being a student and respecting people and stuff like that. So I think each one gave him something else at a different time. Leo taught him New York. Leo taught him how to dress. Leo taught him how to get clothing. Leo taught him about cologne. Leo taught him about everything about life, about whatever was going on. Leo taught him that. He always looked up to Leo. 1954, it's the last game of the season, and Willie is in the batting race, the title in 54 with Duke Snyder, his teammate Don Mueller, and Willie, the three of them. So they go to the last day of the season, and Snyder goes 0 for 4. Mueller goes 1 for 4, and Willie goes 3 for 4, and he ends up winning the batting title over everyone by a couple of percentage points. So he goes to his locker after the game, and there's an envelope with $1,500, and he tells me the story. Of course, he can tell it now. And Willie says, "What's this?" And Leo comes over and says, "I bet $3,500 that you'd win the batting title. That's your part of it." And that's what Leo did. Leo was always doing stuff. Leo taught him New York. Leo taught him the Stork Club. Leo taught him Ed Sullivan. Leo taught him What's My Line. Leo was the guy he looked up to be the man of New York, to show him how to live. This is a kid from Alabama who is making it in New York. And Leo was that part of his life.
My favorite line of the entire Willie Mays hour-long retrospective is the line from Ray Ratto, who kind of sums it up at the very end. And he said, Willie Mays was the most talented player, or he was the best player in baseball. He was the signature player of baseball's most talented era. Yeah. What do you think of that?
Oh, I think it's great. He owned the All-Star game. The All-Star game was the best of the best, right? Yeah. He was the best of the best of the best. He was it. The All-Star game was made for Willie Mays. And he would lead off, and he'd lead off with a hit. And next thing you knew, he scored. He played the whole game. He didn't come out. If he got the extra innings, Willie Mays got the hit that won the game. Willie Mays owned the All-Star game. And Bob Stevens wrote the best line about him when Willie Mays hit a triple in the All-Star game. And Bob Stevens wrote, the ball was hit in an area where the only way it would be caught was the guy who hit it would have to catch it.
Right.
That was Willie. That's the only. It's the only. And I'll tell you another thing I was thinking about today about Willie. We watch baseball today, and I watch a guy goes over his head, and the ball bounces on the warning track in center field, or it hits the wall, and he's standing there. It goes halfway up the wall. That never happened to Willie Mays. If the ball was in the park, Willie caught it. Willie caught it. It's over his head. I'm sorry. Gee, it's a line drive. Boy, those are the toughest to judge. You can't judge that. No. Willie Mays caught everything. If the ball was in the park, the guy caught it. He told Don Mueller, you stay on the right field line. Hank Sauer and Monty, you stay on the left field line. I'll take everything else. And that's the way he played. That's the way he played. And I love that part of him, the defensive part of him, of taking over in center field. I thought it was terrific to hear those stories about him, the way he played.
I think there was probably also a racial component to the All-Star game from the standpoint. I mean, you could speak to it better than I could, but the NL was the league that integrated. The NL had many black stars. I saw Willie talking about the All-Star game, and I think a young Willie said like, hey, they don't think that we're good. Well, we're going to show them how good we are. And, I remember I played golf many times with Vida Blue, and I said, Vida, give me a highlight of your career. And he's like, Krug, you're never going to believe this, but I got Willie Mays to ground out to shortstop in the 71 All-Star game, and I could have just retired right then and there. And if I'd have meant it, he meant it.
Come on.
That's 71 All-Star game at Tiger Stadium, one of the great moments in baseball history, really.
Look, Vida will tell you, and growing up in Louisiana, he'd sit on the porch with his father and listen to Jackie Robinson. That was the huge part of Mansfield, Louisiana, and Vida would sit there. And then, of course, Willie comes on to be the star as Vida's growing up now. He's not just 8 years old. He's a high school kid, and now Willie is the guy. And then to face him in an all-star game was a moment for him. You could just think how excited he was. But I tell the story about Walter Alston. I've told this to you. He'd say, Willie, in the all-star game, what do you think I should do for the lineup? And Willie would say, I'll lead off, Hank Aaron second, Clemente third, and I don't care what you do after that. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter after that. That really is spectacular. And I'll tell you, even the 51, a shot heard around the world, one of my, great, it almost feels like almost seems like a different life ago, to be honest, when they had the HBO special and they flew out Ralph Branca and Bobby Thompson. And this was in the 90s. And they had it at the mercantile thing right there on Sansom. And they had the world premiere, and Ross Greenberg from HBO was there, and all these people from HBO. And I happened to go and I had a chance to interview both Ralph Branca and Bobby Thompson.
Me too.
And it was an amazing. It was something really, really very cool about both those gentlemen. I mean, Branca was just so incredible in defeat. I mean, I don't think he's class personified. And then Bobby Thompson, the only reason I think Branca could appear so many times in New York and all those banquets with Bobby Thompson is because Bobby Thompson was a gentleman. Bobby Thompson was a kind of guy that, he beat you, but he wasn't going to rub your face in it. He was classy. And I remember doing the interview with both those gentlemen, just thinking to myself, this is baseball history. And Bobby Thompson joking with me that Willie was on the on-deck circle and that Willie was nervous and that Willie didn't want that spotlight at that point. But from that point on, really said, hey, I want to be that guy. I want to be the guy in that moment. But he wasn't ready for it at that point. And Bobby Thompson took him off the hook with the shot heard around the world. And it's a great documentary. I would encourage anybody to go check it out. What a joy that was to interview those gentlemen about that documentary in about 51.
I was there. I did it with you. I loved meeting Ralph Branca, having him on the show. The ultimate gentleman, Bobby Thompson, the Flying Scot from Staten Island. Couldn't have been nicer. And of course, the rumor was, that they had the spy in the outfield, and that
with the binoculars or whatever. And I hear Bobby Thompson said, hey, look, he maintains to his death that he never got the sign. Right. Branca was like, hey, look, if it didn't work, why did they try it? Why did they have a guy sitting there if it didn't work? Yeah. And that, both guys were believable. Let's just say that.
Yeah. And they played it out. It was good theater, and they were good friends, and it was nice to see it. But Willie absolutely was on deck, and he told me he was scared to death. Wow. And of course they win, but he made they say his greatest throw in that 51 race to the pennant. Look, the Giants were 13.5 back.
Right. In August.
For a second. The Giants now are 2 out of the wild card, and everyone's ready to kill themselves,
Right.
They were 13.5 back, and you had to win in August 6th. So they end up winning 41 out of 48 to win, and they end up getting in there. But the throw he made, because they tie Brooklyn, and then they have the playoff for the shot heard around the world. But they had to tie Brooklyn, so now they're in a game with the Dodgers, and Billy Cox, who's very fast, number 3 for the Dodgers. He's on third base, and Carl Furillo hits a ball to right center field. And now right center field, you got to go a long way to make the play. And the guy on third has got speed. Think of any ball player right now that's got some speed on third. Willie catches it, wheels around, and throws out Billy Cox at the plate to save the game. And of course, the Giants end up tying the Dodgers at that point. He saves the game. The Giants go on to win it. So they say to Charlie Dressen after the game, who's the Dodger manager, "What do you think of that throw by Willie Mays?" He says, "Let me see him do it again." And of course, he did it again about 50,000 times, including like you described, the 54 World Series. But those are the moments in that 51 season that I'll always remember him talking about, being on deck and throwing Billy Cox out at the plate. And it really wasn't even his best play. He made other plays after that.
He's an amazing player, and we could talk about numbers, but the numbers don't paint the picture.
That's right.
The numbers, they're tremendous numbers, right? 12 Gold Gloves, 24 All-Star games, 6,000 plus total bases, 660 home runs, 30 over 3,000 games played, over 2,000 runs scored, almost 2,000 RBIs. These are all, top tier numbers, top 20 in all of baseball history. 3,293 hits. 150 games he played, 13 straight seasons. 13 straight seasons. That's amazing. These are all amazing stats, but the numbers don't really tell the story. And the number that really doesn't tell the story is the 660, because in reality, I mean, people like yourself could speak to it greater than I, Marty, but in a lot of ways, it's like, who's the home run king? Some people say it's Barry Bonds. Some people say it's Hank Aaron. But if you talk to Barry Bonds and you talk to Hank Aaron and you get their perspective, they're going to tell you it's Willie Mays. Willie Mays played in the Polo Grounds. He played at Candlestick when you had to hit it in the football seats to get it out. He learned to hit to center and to right field to compensate, but he never played in a park that benefited him, unlike Aaron. He lost 2 years to his military service. He had 50 plus home runs his first year back. Probably could have hit another 100. That would have pushed him past Aaron right there. It's interesting. It's like when you hear Aaron talk about the record, you hear Bonds talk about the record. In a lot of ways, Willie's 660 is more impressive than Hank's 755 and more impressive than Bonds's 762 or whatever it is. 660 that from Mays is more impressive than the numbers that those guys had.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're exactly right. And I'm glad you said it. Leo needed him to go to right center and had him do that. And then, of course, coming to Candlestick was impossible. A left-handed hitter was great. McCovey was great at Candlestick because the wind blew out to right. But Willie had to deal with that, and he had to learn how to hit the right center at Candlestick. Orlando also. Candlestick really, really knocked their numbers down. You bring up a great point. The 660 is a big number, and I know Hank Aaron and Willie were kind of leapfrogging each other as they went along in their careers, but somehow or other, the Willie Mays 660 feels more significant than the Hank Aaron.
It really does. It really does. Marty, I got to ask you as well about John Shea brought up a point, and I this is before my time, so I really can't speak to this. But Alvin Dark supposedly didn't allow some of the Niners, some of the Giants Latin players to speak Spanish in the clubhouse. Right. And there were a lot of guys that were pushed out of shape. And I guess it was Willie that kind of galvanized the group and said, hey, don't play for him. Play for me. Don't play for him. Let's play for ourselves. Let's play for you. And at the end of the year, they replaced Alvin Dark, and that chapter was gone. But it sounded like not only was Willie a great ball player, but in a lot of ways, he was their emotional leader and a guy who could get the group and lead the group, even through some ugly situations. And I don't know enough about Dark in that situation. I've heard rumors, but what do you know about that era, about that situation?
Well, Dark did do that. Dark was from the South, and he, wanted everyone to speak English and not speak Spanish. And don't forget, the Giants had a tremendous influence of Latin American players One of the good things about Horace Stoneham was that he brought in so many players from the Dominican Republic. So he wanted people, he didn't want Orlando to play his music on the road. And Orlando said, I'm sorry, I'm playing it. I'm bringing it. And Orlando stood up to him. But a lot of the Latin players couldn't stand up to him. And there was a rift on the team. There's no question. It cost them perhaps another pennant because of it. Look, you had Marichal as well, who, was coming into his own. So Willie did step up. Willie was a good part of that. And I've never really talked to him at length about it. He didn't really want to talk about a lot of tough subjects. Maybe he would with Murph or someone like that. But there are a lot of tough subjects that he and I really didn't touch on, and that would be one of them. So I think that's the truth. But he was very close with Herman Franks. Very close with Herman Franks.
Former
Herman
Giants
Franks,
and Cubs manager. I remember
Herman
Franks.
Franks was his advisor, and Herman made millions with real estate in Salt Lake City and all that. And I know Willie probably participated in some of those things. But Herman really relied on Willie. And there were always rumors that the Cepeda was traded because Herman wanted McCovey at first, and Willie said okay, and Cepeda got traded to the Cardinals for Ray Sadecki, and Herman really was the architect of that, and I'm sure Willie probably, didn't say no. Let's put it that way. So Willie did have a big influence, I think, on the ball club and doing the things that you talked about. He was the captain. And he was the guy you didn't mess around with him. If you were not, you think anyone's going to go up to Willie and say, Willie, we don't like the way you're playing that hitter. Would you please play him that way? Or Willie, you're not running the bases properly. I mean, nobody was going to confront Willie because Willie spoke for himself. His game spoke for himself, and he did run the team.
The line from Eddie Montague's father, who said, I nearly fell out of the stands when I watched Willie for the first time. I mean, could you imagine being a baseball scout, looking at a young Willie Mays, and you're like, wait a second, what? Look at this guy. This is unbelievable. That's an incredible story. And
they didn't know what they were seeing.
Yeah,
when they were watching the young black players because they didn't know.
Right.
They didn't. Are they going to be real good? How good are they? Can they run? Can they do all this stuff? That's what we had at those days. They didn't really understand what they were seeing.
Marty, let me ask you this. Horace Stoneham brought Willie to San Francisco, but Horace Stoneham also sent Willie leaving. And he just was in a tough financial situation. The owner of the Mets, Joan Payson, or I believe could pay, she promised Horace Stoneham that she would financially take care of Willie, and the Giants couldn't secure his future financially. And I'm just kind of wondering, since you had all those conversations and time with Willie, I know he didn't want to leave New York to come west in 58. He was, all he knew was New York, and he wanted to stay there. It was the Mecca, and he wanted to stay there and play baseball in a town that was absolutely, loved its baseball. So he didn't want to come west in 58, but did. And my dad told me that even though San Francisco fans loved Willie Mays, that they were still a love affair with Joe DiMaggio, that they were very reluctant to sign over Willie as the greatest because they had seen DiMaggio and he had a 65 game hitting streak in the minors or something like that. Some ridiculous streak in the minors. That was even better than 56, right? Didn't he have a longer streak in the PCL? But they loved Joe. He was a North Beach kid, Italian American, and they loved him. And so that was a tough time. But when Willie went back to New York, was he happy to go back to New York? Because I saw McCovey said, "Hey, that was the day we knew we realized anybody could be traded. If Willie could be traded, anybody could be traded." He was traded for Charlie Williams, who that made no sense. But do you think Willie welcomed the trade back to New York there at the end of his career, or was that an unhappy moment as well?
No, I think he understood it. Horace was selling the team. If you don't remember in those days, Horace was selling the team, and we always had people coming to the games from the Micronesians would come to the game. You never knew who he was going to sell to next, and there were rumors all the time. Remember the George, was it Schiff or something like that from Carolina? He was going to buy the team.
George Ship.
Remember?
Yeah, he came out. They celebrated him one night game like he was going to own the team. I mean,
Right.
it was like a
So
big
this
deal.
was going on all the time. So Willie was, he wanted his look. Willie understood. He was a businessman. He wanted his future secured, and Joan Payson loved him. And she told Horace, "I will take care of Willie for the rest of his life." And Willie was happy to do it. And he was going back to New York. And look, the Mets actually retired his number a couple of years ago, which was a big deal. He went back to New York for Charlie Williams, the knuckleballer, and his first game back against the Giants for the Mets, he ends up hitting a home run for the Mets to beat the Giants and Dan Carithers, and he ends up rounding the bases, and he almost ran into the Giants dugout by mistake.
Wow.
You would tell me that story all the time. But look, he got to New York. He was a big influence on them winning the pennant, and he was on deck in this game 7. He was almost going to come up in game 7 when they got beat by the A's in game 7. And then, of course, the famous play at the plate, with Ray Fosse making the tag and Willie begging the umpire that it was a bad call. And he stumbled around a little bit in that World Series.
He fell down in the outfield, right?
Yeah,
People made a big deal about that.
It was time. It was time. But going to New York for him was terrific because it gave him the security of knowing when he left baseball, he would be taken care of. And Joan Payson loved him.
What years did you live back in New York? What years? What year? I mean, I know you went from New York to Miami to San Francisco.
Right.
But what years were you in New York?
1946 until 1956.
Okay, so you were right there, and I'm wondering. I mean, Dodgers, Yankees, Giants, Giants, and Mays against DiMaggio and the Yankees in 51. Giants win the World Series in 54. Dodgers have the most amazing season of all time, maybe in 55, with the guy makes the catch in the left field corner. Sandy Amorose makes the catch. Makes the catch, and 55 was the next year. Wait till next year. 55 was next year for Dodgers fans.
Johnny Padres.
What was that like? As far as not necessarily the success, but they went from adored, supported, beloved to gone at the end of the 57 season. Yeah. What was? I mean, it sounds like you also were gone to Miami at that point.
Yeah,
but I left. Mean, what was it like for New York to lose the Giants, the Dodgers, but not just the Giants and the Dodgers? Duke Schneider, Willie Mays. I mean, great, all-time type players. What was that? That must have just been unbelievably scarring emotionally for those fans when you look at the way the Dodgers fans celebrated dem bums in Brooklyn, and the Giants fans loved the Giants, in Manhattan, and you had the Yankees in the Bronx, and the Yankees, of course, stayed and became bigger and better than ever. But what was it like watching the momentum of New York baseball in the 50s, and then it was the future, and I'm sure everybody looked at it as something that had to happen. The country was settled east to west, but that must have been a devastating 57 must have been an absolutely devastating end to the year for New York City.
Well, number one, I left in 56. So when I left, we still had them bums. I watched the World Series in 1950.
Tom Larson.
Yeah, I watched the World Series in 1956 in Miami Beach. My furniture was on the truck when Sal Maglie pitched his no-hitter against the Phillies.
The barber.
In late September. I saw it on TV. I must have been such a crazy baseball fan that I went to someone's house to watch the Giants and the Dodgers and the Phillies in late September because that pennant race was so tight with the Braves and the Dodgers, and I think the Reds were in it then. But I left in 56, so when I left, them bums were still there. And look, I'm 10 years old.
What was the impetus for the Dodgers leaving? Because the Giants stopped selling tickets, right? The Polo Grounds was a wasteland at the end, but wasn't Ebbets packed all the way through?
No, not necessarily.
I mean,
they drew good crowds, but O'Malley wanted a new stadium, and he wanted a new, beautiful stadium in the middle of Brooklyn. And Robert Moses, who was the architect of all the bridges and freeways and infrastructure of New York in the 50s, said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll give you Queens, where Shea eventually was put. We'll give you out there, but he didn't want to go out there because the suburbs weren't exactly happening at that time. They became big, but they weren't happening at that time. So O'Malley said, hey, if I can't have a stadium in the middle of Brooklyn, I'm going to look somewhere else. Now, don't forget, the West Coast after World War II, they were dying for Major League Baseball. The PCL was such a big deal that every year there was a rumor. Cleveland's going to Los Angeles. The St. Louis Browns are going to Los Angeles. Everyone was always going to Los Angeles. And so when they eventually did go to Los Angeles, it wasn't that much of a shock that the PCL was going to end up getting a team in California. But for me leaving, when I left, hey, the Dodgers were still, I'm still watching the Dodgers, I'm watching the Giants and all that. But Horace was getting killed. He was losing money right and left because the New York Giants weren't going to play there anymore. They went to Yankee Stadium. Boxing matches weren't there anymore. And the Polo Grounds wasn't a revenue producer for him. So he knew he had to leave. So O'Malley made the deal in LA, and Horace knew he was going to leave too. He was never going to get a new stadium there, but he was not going to go to Minneapolis because Horace was a Broadway guy. Horace was Toots Shor. Horace was the theater. Horace was, a character of New York. Where's he going? To Minneapolis and St. Paul? What's he going to do there? So when O'Malley said, hey, why don't you go to San Francisco? Horace said, that's a good idea. And that's when the George Christopher and Francis McCarty and those folks from San Francisco came to New York and made the deal with Horace to go. But to get to your question, with that background, it devastated the fans of Brooklyn. Come on, Brooklyn was its own city. Brooklyn was its own identity. I still say to people, I'm from Brooklyn, and I say it with pride. When they lost the Dodgers, the heart was taken out of Brooklyn. And when the Giants went, part of the Giants' heart was taken out of New York City as well. And what was left? The Yankees, and no one cared about the Yankees. Come on, if I was in Brooklyn, if there was a Giants fan who lived on my block, you didn't talk to him. A Yankee fan, forget it. They weren't even considered in Brooklyn. That's New York baseball. And that's the baseball that Willie walked into. And that's the baseball I left in 56. And the Dodgers and Giants left at the end of 57. And it did devastate the fans. And that's why the Mets were so beloved when they came in 62. They lost 120 games, but everybody loved them.
Is that how the Mets got their colors? They got the blue from the Dodgers and the orange from the Giants?
Exactly. They had the blue and the orange of the Dodgers and the Giants. And that's why they loved the Mets, the amazing Mets. And when the Dodgers and Giants came back to play the Mets, the Polo Grounds was filled. It was filled. It was exciting. I love doing shows about those games.
I can only imagine what it must have been like in New York City in the 50s with Mantle and Mays and Schneider all doing their thing at the same time.
What?
I mean, you got, truly.
Hey, there was look, Frank Gifford was good. Charlie Connolly was good.
Sure.
The Knicks, they used to play triple headers to get people to go to an NBA game. But, no one cared about bowling and golf and all that. It was Brooklyn. It was baseball, New York baseball. That's what was on the map. And that's what we live for, our baseball cards. And we couldn't wait for the next baseball game.
Well,
hey, I'll say one thing. I don't think I've changed much.
No, you haven't. You're exactly the same. We had a conversation about Elliot Ramos a few years ago. And I said, give me a player that he reminds you of. And you said Willie Mays. Yeah. And I fully understood what you meant at the time. You weren't saying that Elliot Ramos was going to be one of the all-time greats. What you were saying is, Elliot Ramos, 5'11", 190-pound, right-handed hitter, 5 tools. Willie Mays, basically the same size, right-handed hitter, 5 tools. And that was years ago. Well, we're talking about 2-3 years ago. A lot of people thought Ramos was not even going to make it to the majors over the last year or two, but he has found a way, and he is a joy to watch. Now, the Giants lost today 6-5. Ramos went 0 for 4, did drive in a run, but Ramos is hitting .310 with a .388 on base. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sending him to Arlington for the All-Star game as the Giants representative. I would love for it to happen. Just a side note on the Giants right now. I enjoyed the fact that they brought up the young kids. Only Ramos has been able to stick. The other guys have been farmed out, though I think we'll see Matos again, maybe in a week or two. And Luciano, I think we will definitely see again in the future. I just don't know exactly when. But what do you think? I mean, Ramos is such a great kid. I did an interview with him in the clubhouse before spring training, or in spring training before last year. And he told me at the time, hey, I don't want anything handed to me. I need to go to AAA. I need to prove that I can produce. And then after that, then I can sit there and say, call me up and make demands. But until I produce in AAA, and he didn't. He had a rough year, and that led him into this year. But this year, he did make a breakthrough at AAA. They called him up. He's kept his head above water. He's playing great. And I'm so happy for him. Absolutely so thrilled for him. But you did make the comparison to Mays, and tell us what you saw, because I knew at the time that you weren't saying he was an all-time great, but that you were seeing a lot of the similarities, body type, bat speed, arm strength, a lot of the same things that make Elliot amazing. Willie had all those skills.
Well, he just physically looked like him to me. Willie, had that same kind of physique, and he was playing center field. When I saw him in the instructional league, I saw him in Arizona, and I saw the bat speed. And I've said this for years. I said the bat speed about this guy is exceptional. And I thought they should have kept him last year. I thought they sent him out too soon last year. This year in spring training, they sent him out after the second week of spring training. They sent him to Sacramento. But for me, the physique and the physical tools, I saw the power there. And that's what's kind of reminded me. And he was only a kid. He was 17, 18 years old at that point.
Yeah.
So at that point, he reminded me a little bit physically of Willie. Now, of course, naively saying that, he wasn't going to have the power or the running speed that Willie had, or the brain power that Willie had, as a baseball player. But he did physically remind me of Willie.
Tomorrow night, at Rickwood Field there, we're going to get Giants Cardinals. And why don't we finish up with that? How do you think the night's going to be different now that Willie has passed? And what does that place hold? And how excited are you to go see a Major League Baseball game in the oldest park in America?
Yeah, very, very much. I went there last night. We went to check it out last night. Number one, it holds about 8,000. Wow. It reminded me of the Orange Bowl in a way of trying to get there. When I grew up in the Orange Bowl, you used to park on people's lawns, and every street was blocked off, and you couldn't get close and all that kind of stuff. This place last night, everything was blocked off, like 4 blocks around it. It was a walk to get in the place. This is not like going to a big stadium somewhere. This is like a stadium built in 1910 in a little neighborhood. So when you sit there and you look at the steel girders, that's the steel from 1910. This has not been rebuilt. And the little parts of the roof, it's like an older roof. Reminds me of a spring training park. That's what it reminds me of. So tomorrow night will be very interesting in that park. 8,000. The place will be packed. But it will be like going to Willie Mays' memorial, really. And I think everyone in the world is going to want to tell their Willie Mays story. And I think the Cardinal-Giant game could be going on in the background. No one's going to be watching, and they're going to be watching the scoreboard or on TV. They'll have 10,000 people coming in into the booth giving their remembrances of Willie.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be so special. Marty, we'll let you go. We've done an hour here with you, and we appreciate your time. And any last anecdote, or do you have a story of any your time with Willie? I know you guys have done a number of appearances through the years, and we've talked an awful lot about Willie, but I've done a lot of the talking. Is there a memory or something that's kind of stays with you that maybe we haven't gleaned from you through our conversations?
Well, I had fun with him. I had fun with Willie. I would say, I was at the stage in my life where I had done certain things and, in my life and accomplished things. And I had my show and he listened to the show. He loved pecan. I said that before. He loved listening to me and pecan on the patio. And I could talk to him. And we would do these shows at Tommy Bahama. And we would go to Tommy Bahama and he would leave wearing 3 shirts and 4 jackets, whatever he would, and I would walk away leaving with a pair of socks. And he'd say, "Well, wait a minute, you should have this." And I said, "Hey, you're Willie Mays. I'm not. Okay, that's why you can do this." And we had these conversations about buying a car. He'd say, "Oh, go to the place and just say this and that." I said, "You're the guy who can do that. I can't do it." And we would go back and forth like that a lot. But he was fun. I had fun with him, and I loved his baseball story. For me, it was my baseball cards coming to life. I didn't see him play, and I would say to Willie, I was in Florida in the '60s. I saw you play in an All-Star game, or maybe an afternoon game that started at 3 o'clock in Florida. We'd get to see it on a Saturday, and I would say, "Were you any good? Could you play?" And here I am saying that to Willie Mays. And that was the relationship we had. I liked him, and we had fun with each other, and we did the dance together, and it was fun. It's something, of all the things I've done in my life, the biggest honor I ever have is being with Willie Mays and Marty Lurie, who had that on their bingo card in 1956.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Great stuff, Marty. And then, of course, losing the MVP to Maury Wills. He never should have lost the MVP to Maury Wills. That was just a bad vote. And, but I remember my dad just talking about Willie, just be like, simply the best, and the best base runner, the best fielder, the best thrower, the best hitter. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. My dad used to talk about this all the time. He said, Willie played so hard that literally, he said multiple times throughout his career, he would collapse in the heat of the summer from heat exhaustion. He'd have to be hospitalized. And he would sometimes have to be hospitalized for, 48 hours, 72 hours. And then here he is. They pumped him full of fluids and he's back out there. But he said he played so hard that he literally would drive himself to the brink of collapsing. And he said it happened multiple years.
Yep, very true. In the '60s, very true. And again, if you look at his record from 54 to 66 or 7, 152, 153, 152, 159. The guy missed like 14 games, in 12 years. And that's the way he played. And yes, he would become emotionally exhausted and physically exhausted. And he would, Dad is right. That is so true about Willie. He gave it everything he had every single day. When he performed for the fans, and he never, ever gave you half an effort, ever. He never gave away an at bat.
Great career, great man, and I'm very proud to say that he's on the team that I root for. He's a giant. And it was a sad day for baseball, but it was a sadder day yesterday for us, for Giants fans, because we were the ones that had the love affair. The strongest love affair with the great Willie Mays. And Marty, I value our friendship and your guidance and all the advice you've given me through the years. And we've been friends for a long time. We'll be friends until the bitter end. And I just want to say, I thank you for taking the time. I know you had a lot going on out there in Alabama today, and there's events and different things going on. Thank you for taking the time to share your recollections of the greatest player with us. And love you, brother, and safe travels to you. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk more baseball throughout the summer, and hopefully the Giants can make this entertaining to the end. I didn't expect Willie to pass. These things are always a surprise, but I think the audience really benefited today from your recollections of a great player and even a better man. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll leave you with the final word.
You're the best. Come on, nobody works harder than you. I know that. And as I said, you loved Willie. The community loves him. You can come out to the ballpark tomorrow. They're going to have some special event in center field. You can sign a book, like going, like the Babe Ruth, thing they had in the rotunda in Yankee Stadium and all that.
Yeah.
So there will be something you can watch the game tomorrow night at the ballpark. So the fans can get involved in that level. And there's so many stories. I can't wait to do the show this weekend to see.
Oh, I can't. You know what I'm waiting for? I can't wait till your next time you have Bruce Jenkins on.
Yeah. Saturday and Sunday.
Jenks is an LA guy. He doesn't want to hear me say that, but he was an LA guy, and so he had a different perspective. But then, obviously, as a guy who's as much a student of baseball as Bruce is, I'm sure he's got all kinds of anecdotes and recollections. And when you guys get going on anything, it's great stuff. But for this will be one for the archive.
It's gonna be good. You got to get up early, 7 a.m. Saturday and Sunday, early shows.
You know what? Is there a way you could when's he on? Saturday or Sunday, right?
He'll be on Saturday and Sunday, and he'll be on probably 8 a.m. or so Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, we gotta get Raph to put that up at KMBR.com so we the rest of us can catch that if we miss it.
It'll be there for you.
Marty, safe travels, my friend. Enjoy the game tomorrow night. Thank you once again for coming on the Krueger Show. We love you, brother.
All right, congratulations on everything you do. Be well.
Be well. There you go. Thanks to Marty. Thanks to all of you. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you won't get exactly what